Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dylan, I'm your host, and we've got a great episode. We've got a wonderful guest today. We're going to talk all about development, but before we intro our guest, Matt, my blue collar badass, how's it going, my friend?
It's going fantastic, Dylan. Another busy week here in southeastern Michigan, and just because we talk about the damn weather every show, I'm going to do my quick update that right now Michigan is absolutely not trying to disappoint. We've had 2 days in a row of nice sunshine. So just before we came live, I got the flash flood warning on my phone. So we are in for another downpour. It seems like any minute.
If we could ship your water to California, then I think we'd all be or to the West in general, which is, all on fire right now. I think we'd be doing really well.
We should work on that.
Or even to Canada and put out all their fires. Canada, Idaho, Oregon, California, they're all burning right now. All right, guys, without further ado, I'd love to introduce our guest, David Carbajal. David is a developer, been in construction for over a decade, just a ton of great experience in being an owner's rep and on the GC side, and now kind of leading and doing his own development thing and getting into where he's owning and doing the projects himself. So I'd love to have David on and really from a owner's perspective on construction, what's going on in the industry, how we can improve it. Now we've got all three, I think, sides of the table present in this conversation. So David, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me to the show. Dylan and Matt and I have had several conversations. I think, we always have to cut them short because we could go on and on about all the different topics, and we're all very passionate about each aspect of the industry that we deal with. I've been in, and it's crazy, I'm 34 years old, but I've been in construction in the industry for about 20 years. I started in high school. I elected to run with the technology of construction as my elective. I went to technology-based high school. So from there, I went straight into college and got my degree in my bachelor's in construction management and engineering. From there, I worked and interned with a large national general contractor, total for about 10 to 12 years. Worked my way from project engineer or from intern project engineer to project manager to senior project manager. And then I went and kind of stepped up, lateraled over to the owner side, became a owner rep for a nationwide developer that focused predominantly on hotels, select service type hotels, going after that business traveler. Although the past 2-3 years, the focus had started to kind of evolve into the leisure travel market. We did some properties in Santa Monica, California. We've done some stuff, heavily these past 2 years, like in Florida. And as of late, as Dylan mentioned, I've had a lot of experience and gone through a lot of different challenges, kind of adding up the total base of projects I've done. It was coming up to about 800 million, predominantly in new construction. And I've got to learn so much, getting into these big, very challenging projects that I felt, not only for travel. I have 2 young kids. I have a son who's 4 years old, and I just had a daughter. She is now 4 months old, and travel's tough, and it's necessary in construction, especially if you're working for a larger type corporate development company. So I wanted to take things into my own hands and start to do my own projects. I'm doing some residential stuff coming out here in Southern California. Probably first quarter of next year, I'll be done with the first batch. And I'm also doing some hotels up in the wine country, you could call it. I know, Dylan, you're really in the wine country, but out in Temecula, California. I'm working on some hotels out there. And so I've kind of taken the experience I've had and now I'm transitioning that into my own projects. Also going to get, and I may be filling up my plate here too much, but I'll deal with it as it comes. but I am getting my GC license within the next month. And I'm going to, paper GC or GC some of these smaller homes that I'm doing just to keep things in house and keep it tight. It helps a lot with the margins and control of product and whatnot. So, yeah, I don't know if try to go through it as quick as I could there with my background and history, but yeah, happy to be here.
Well, I'm going to jump right in because that was a lot of awesomeness to unpack there, David. First of all, congrats on the new baby, and that's awesome. I've got 3 kids of my own, so I know the feeling.
Yep,
Same with the travel, man. I spent about 7-8 years traveling upwards of 5-6 days a week, and it wears on you, man, especially with a young family. So I totally get where you're coming from on that side. I will say too, you're kind of living the typical general contractor's dream, I think, right? You started off building for other people, and now you're transitioning to the owner side of the table, but now you're kind of getting back, it sounds like, to building for yourself, which hell yeah, that's what we're all shooting for in some capacity. So it sounds really great, man.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because like you said, I started as a general contractor, and then I went to the owner side hiring the general contractor. And now I need to go back to the general contractor roots and kind of remember what I learned or forgot to be both a good general contractor and a good owner, because there are definitely such things as, and I've learned this, as a bad owner. When you're indecisive, when you keep changing your mind, I mean, it's just costing tons of time and tons of money on every project. So it's very important to me just to realize that right out front, and not to drive our consultants crazy, as I'm sure Dillon, late changes, as aren't easy for the owner to understand most of the time, and are very frustrating when, they think it can happen overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in there, like I think it comes down to education, right? Most owners haven't been through enough projects, for the most part, right? They've done a few, but unless they've been in this game for a while, they haven't gone through enough processes to know what they don't know, right? To know those pitfalls, to know what needs to be done, when design decisions need to be made, what is truly a change order, what's not, what's going to cost them, time and money, or what's not. And I think it's, I wish more owners were more educated in the process. And they don't need to know everything, but having typically a better understanding of key design decisions will help the process. And I think that's for all owners, that's probably one of the biggest things that I just continued to see was, they're more tied up in the financing side of it and the money end of it, and when's this thing going to open, than like, oh, what do you mean I need to decide on paint color or, something what could be seemingly innocuous to them, but holds up a lot of other pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's, it's one thing conceptually to say, but to actually implement it, like in the homes that I'm doing now, you have to reground yourself and actually do it, because it makes so much sense. Like, oh no, these design decisions need to be made, today, as you're getting into, the development of your plans. But to actually, hey, wait a minute, like I know this, dang, I got to do it. Like I can't just talk what I'm, talk about it and do it. And it's been fun. Another cool thing is that I've gotten my wife involved in the homes that we're doing. And it's something we've always, talked about doing, and having her, she's always loved design, and she's very creative. She went to USC film school, and, so she has like a very creative eye, and it's been nice to get her to, partake in the whole development of the plans. And, I'm really looking forward to getting into these, but she helps me, cause I'd preach to her, like, we need to get all this, the layout all squared away and not make any changes late. And then she's like, well, we better make sure we look at these, conceptual plans, with the fine tooth comb and get it done. So I was like, oh, you're right. I gotta walk the walk, right? Not just talk and conceptually understand it.
That's cool. You're bringing your wife in. That's got to be fun for both of you. And it's got to be helpful to a point to you, especially because construction as an industry is one of the highest stress industries out there. Right. And you're all of a sudden playing two sides of the table. So you've got like double the stress already. So having somebody you're close with as your partner like that has got to kind of help alleviate some of that. At least you can vent back and forth to each other and know what each other's talking about. Not just like the angry GC who comes home and screams and yells for 2 hours about his day that no one else in the house even has a concept of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Or holding in all the stress, and not trying to bring it home. And
for sure,
eventually it ends up coming out another way. So
yeah,
it's been so far so good. I'm sure we'll, increase our communication skills as the project progresses, but I'm excited and looking forward to it.
So in that, David, I mean, like you played, two
quick,
sides.
because you mentioned it and we've talked.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you're good. Can you hear me? All right.
Go for it, Matt.
Great internet connection here today. So I wanted to touch on the GC license that you're working on, David. We kind of talked before offline about this a bit, but in Michigan, there is no commercial level general contractor's license, period, which is bizarre to me. But kind of walk us through what the steps are, because I know in California especially, it's a pretty drawn out process, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I started the process 4 months ago. Kind of planning ahead and knowing that I was, going to make this transition and it was imminently happening. Didn't know exactly when it's happened, but I'm happy that I started in March, I believe. Getting the application submitted, and it's just been a lot of back and forth, and it's taken a long time. The application is pretty cumbersome itself. Asks for a lot of background, kind of your history and experience, and really what the board looks for is the guy that was swinging the hammer, was a framer, an apprentice, and so it's a lot more challenging to get it having the education kind of background, as project manager, hiring the guys that, are doing the physical labor. So I had to walk through that, and they had a couple comments back, and that takes another month if they have a round of comments to get them back to you. And then you resubmit them, and then it takes them another 2 weeks to look at them. So I had to not massage as much, so to say, a little different word is be more descriptive as to what I've done. Quality control over a lot of these trades. So I had to be specific onto, an example. They wanted more examples, some more references. So finally I got through that. And then before I submitted the application, I went through a school. And so they checked the actual name of the company, and it needs to be aligned with the type of license you're getting. So for me, it's general building is what I'm going for. And so the last portion of my name had development, and they said that was fine. The school did. Then I got back word from the board, and they're like, oh no, you need to be more specific. That's not going to fly. And in the front of my name, I had Steel Rock was the name. And they're like, oh, you're not going to be a steel contractor. So I had to do a DBA, resubmit. So it's been a very long drawn out process, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And now my test, it took another month after they finally approved it to give me a test date. My test is in 3 weeks from now. And a lot of it for me is just, going through and refreshing kind of what I've learned, from the education side on, all the codes, basic codes. You need to know a little bit of everything, which is good. I'm actually happy that they don't just pass out licenses here. So it's been tough, but I have my test in 3 weeks, and then you have to pass with like a 80% or higher. And then 4 to 6 weeks after that, they'll issue your license. So right now for me, I'm chasing the groundbreaking of these first 3 homes that I'm building, so we'll see where it ends up, but I'm pushing it.
So are you thinking you're going to be shoved into a spot where you have to hire another GC at least temporarily, or is that an option?
I might, or I can do it as a owner builder.
Okay.
So maybe my wife can get, pull one permit as an owner builder. I could pull another one, and I could find a buddy or my business partner who's actually doing this with me to do it.
Gotcha.
But then you'd need to transfer it over. It would get a little more complicated.
Sure.
But we'll make it work regardless. We're building as quick as we can. That's the plan.
There you go.
Nonstop. We're going to figure it out.
That's the only way to go in this industry. Just keep charging forward.
Yeah, it's so true. And you need to have, and this is something I've always learned and been taught, and it's kind of ingrained in me, is to have that sense of urgency. Like you should have, a week before you're done on day one at the beginning. And it's hard to do because it's easy to coast through the design phase and kind of think you got plenty of time. It's like, no, let's build up that urgency up front. That way it's a constant sense of urgency as opposed to going crazy, which it's going to be towards the end no matter what. But it's just, you'll have a much more successful project if you can really let that urgency sink in and take action like it's a week from opening completion, SIBO for a house.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and that urgency too is going to serve you in that you're probably going to make more concrete design decisions up front that aren't going to hopefully bite you in on the backside, right? Where a lot of things get slid or not looked at, not cared about up front, and that usually bites everybody in change orders and delays and cost implications, schedule, and like you guys are saying, for a lot of projects, it's you keep moving as much as you can, and a lot of it just needs to get. Now you're going to deal with a lot of paperwork on the back end to unwind the deals or structure them differently. In your case, for how you're building them, how you're moving forward, and this is a big thing on the owner and developer side, is how they've papered it. What are the structures that go into the deals that I think a lot of people just don't know, right? Aren't aware of, that there's, a lot of entity structures or financing structures that have to get done, or that they brought investors on, how all that works on putting a deal together versus, just strictly the design side or strictly as a contractor, where somebody's paying for something somewhere, but how that all comes together isn't always clear. And that's, we don't need to know, but it's always interesting to see how many different entities or paperwork goes into the owner's side.
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, you're the source. You're where the money's coming from now. And I've had experience in all these kind of different levels. But I've always worked for somebody who sources the funds, and so I have learned, an enormous amount on the financing side and deal structure, and, kind of where that cash flow comes from, how we're going to get the construction loans. Like you said, that's all, the best way to learn has been to do it. And then on the designer side, since I was doing like $50 million projects, we would always have the luxury of having, the best architect, best engineers, A-level people. And not to say that the guys I'm using aren't A people, but it's kind of taking a step down. It sounds bad saying taking a step down, but simplifying the design process, maybe using a track home that was already done and has been approved, and, embellishing it a little bit and reusing it. Your plans are done. I mean, it's a lot different than, a brand new 220 room hotel that starts from, SDs to DDs and big, long 2-year evolution of plan development for a small single family home. So I've had to, it's hard, unlearn, not be as, I guess, lower the bar. It sounds horrible saying that. But simplifying, I guess, is the better word on that whole design process.
And that makes sense. And I think it's just a different level of sophistication, right? Of the partners you're teaming up with. And it's probably, well, I know it is because I've done it. It's the same with the subs, with your trades too. It takes a a different level of carpenter to go build a $50 million hotel than it does to build a 2,000 square foot home. And that's part of the joy and the beauty and the headache of doing what we do, right? You got to be able to make teams based on what your end goal is. And those teams are always going to be different depending on which way you're running.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean you can't get, let's call them a less sophisticated team and then bring them up to where you were expecting and bridge that gap to where now you have the best, most aligned, lean team to build your homes. I mean, so it's going to be good. It'll be interesting. I just have to remind myself to, let's train people to bridge that gap from what I was used to, what I need to, I guess, get used to.
Yeah. And once you build that team and you build your new guys up to your level, don't ever let them go, man.
No,
because you guys will take over the world at that point. You're unstoppable once you all are aligned like that.
No. And that's the plan. And I think, Dillon, I think one thing you guys like to talk about all the time is, how can we improve the industry? And that's kind of something that, I've gone through some bad job sites or bad job site teams where it's one bad apple kind of poisons the whole bunch. I've gone through experiences where we didn't pull the weed out and it, kind of infested the entire garden. And what I want to do, and I'm going to try to implement this on the hotel. It's a boutique hotel that I'm going to be managing, is to change the culture a bit, on the job site and figure out what motivates, I don't think we could get to the labor level, but we may be able to get to like the supervisor level, find out what they're after, what motivates them, what gets them going, and try to build better communication on the job site, just create a job site in an environment that companies want to get to and they want to work on your projects. And you're not trying to hunt and chase for scrap for bidders. They're waiting in line to try to get on your job site. So it sounds a little pipe dream in a way sometimes, because if you speak to older people in the industry, they're a bit scarred, and they're like, you're crazy. This is the way you have to do things. This is the way it is. But I don't know. I guess I have this vision and hope that somehow we can change the culture in construction a bit.
Well, congratulations, because you just summarized like the last 7 months of this podcast in about 2.5 minutes there. There is a way to change this industry and to boost culture, to boost profits all at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's happening, whether people want to admit it or not. I mean, it takes a lot of work, but that's what we can't preach enough about it on the show and outside of the podcast in our real lives too.
Yeah. I mean, why not, everybody on the project team who's swinging the hand. I mean, that's where the real work comes in. All the guys that are busting their butt out there all day. If we could figure out how to get them excited to get up and go work and to get to this job site where everyone respects each other, where it's, and it'll have growing pains, but we got to try, right? I mean, and I feel like I am in a position to where I can almost force some of that, on the job site, being the owner, developer, and the GC, making it a requirement. Like, if you have a bad attitude, get the heck off my job site.
Yeah. And it starts with culture. It starts with giving a shit about people in general. And then, it just bleeds into everything else. And if you care about the superintendents, the project managers, the foremen of, all the subs, things go a lot better. Those have been the best jobs that I've been on, is when people had a mutual respect for everything that everybody was doing, right? Where I respected the foreman and what they were doing and leading their teams. And, they had respect for what I did in my role. And if we could come to the table there, everything just moved so much better moving forward. And I think, it starts with culture. And then to your earlier point too, it's, like residential is not equal to commercial, right? There's a gap between those two things. And just, the complexity, build quality in a lot of them. And I think, a lot of people have a hard time making the jump, one way or the other between the two. And I think that's going to be probably your biggest challenge, is going between a commercial hotel build and a house build in the same week. And like, oh wait, this, the things don't have to be, they're not the same, right? It's a completely different build type. And that'll probably be one of your biggest challenges here moving forward, is like going to the hotel build and like things need to be here, and the house build, things don't quite need to be there.
No, it is. That's going to be the biggest adjustment. And, aligning my expectations with reality really is what it's going to be. Because it's just not going to require the same sophistication. But at the same time, you don't want to go into it thinking that and then set yourself up for a disaster, and kind of underestimate what really needs to be done on that job.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to agree with you. I mean, you don't want to dumb it down and risk, keeping your feet in the fire for too long. Because if you can find that secret sauce where you build the culture on your job site and you have that same culture permeate from your residential to your commercial and back again, I honestly think you can build an unstoppable force in this industry at that point.
Yeah. And ideally it's, picking some of the team members from the commercial stuff to do the residential. And eventually that's my plan, is I'll have, a larger commercial project going, and, staggered, I'll have some residential stuff going on the side, and I can use the same team members that have the same, culture and are aligned with, what we're going after and trying to do, to almost work on the homes on the side.
Yeah. And the subs will appreciate it as long as you keep them busy and you've got work constantly stacked. They won't have a reason to go anywhere else. No,
exactly. And, in addition to just the sub trades, it would be great. And I think it's a topic to bring up with Dillon here, to get the consultants aligned and on the same page, because I'll tell you guys, and I'm sure you had experience with it, but in owner meetings, subcontractor meetings, it's always constantly somebody didn't do something because of somebody else. Most of the time it's because the GC and the architect, keep pointing the finger back and forth. It's just constant blame 24/7. And it's like, it's very difficult, to bridge that. The only way to do it, and I've found it, very effective, is to throw them in the same room, go RFI by RFI or whatever, however you want to do it, and just force the communication. As an owner or an owner rep, trying to get them to talk, it's as simple sometimes as just getting on the same line with them or forcing them to be on the same line. You can make the intro and say, hey guys, go through the list, and you just have to sit there. You interject when they can't decide on something, but you have to sit there and force people to coordinate and communicate. And I think, that's with everything though. I mean, it starts with the architect and general contractor, and you could say the same thing between subs and trades. I mean, you could say the same thing between, once you're done with the project, the operating side and the general contractor. There's so much, it's communication. That's the biggest thing on any job site. A big thing that I'm pretty stringent on is having weekly meetings, no matter what stage of the project's in. Even if it's Shanghai, getting it baked in at the beginning of a job, once you have your team set up, to just touch base every single week, even if not much happened. I mean, just make it a habit and instill that in your team. And it's very effective.
Yeah, and keep those meetings short and sweet. If they need to be, don't belabor points that don't need to be belabored. And I mean, you're right. Like having everybody on the same page at the beginning, having the architect, the GC, all aligned. But it's also, like you said earlier, if there's a bad apple on either side, like they've got to go. Because I've seen it both ways, where some architect is egotistical and it's his way or the highway, and then that stalls everything. I've seen it happen on the GC side, and they throw everything over the fence to where nothing ever moves. No one can make a decision. They're just trying to shed liability and responsibility, really responsibility, or doing anything. So I've seen it on both sides of the table. Whether anyone will ever admit that, that's a whole different story. But if we can come to the table up front and, to shed those bad apples, like, hey, I don't want this guy on my job. As an owner, you can do that, right? Like the rest of us don't have that maybe luxury. But I think that's where it all starts is, mutual respect for what everybody has to do, what your role is. And then, here's what I need to move forward, and just have like a real conversation. I know this is like a hard thing for a lot of people to come to, but at the end of the day, that's what needs to happen is, here's what we need to move forward. Here's what you need to do.
Yeah, it's mutually beneficial to both parties. I mean, if somebody doesn't want to be there, they shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
I mean, right? If they're bitter and sour, go find somewhere else to do that. Or, you're not enjoying what you're doing, buddy. Get out of here.
And they're stuck. I mean, it's
it's sad.
Golden handcuffs of some sort, and they're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
As sad as that is, I mean, you see it all the time.
It's absolutely real. I mean, I know it is because a lot of older superintendents or executive project man. I mean, they own part of the company, and they're tied to that company, or else they're going to lose their, the equity they have in that company if they leave. And it's a real thing. Like, some would consider it smart from a business standpoint. But on a personal level, they're stuck. And so that it'd be interesting to see how that impacts performance and, an image of a company throughout time. I don't know if there probably isn't a way to connect that. It seems like a very thorough investigative project, but
yeah, at least not for privately owned. But I mean, so moving kind of forward through time, there's obviously a lot we can improve, communication being like a core thing for it. But what else are you seeing out there, having been involved in now some small projects and some past, really big developments that have really big timelines. But what are you seeing as the, thing that really needs to be unlocked or pushed forward through the industry to really help us all, not just culture and communication, but what else can help us, build better?
So I always have wild thoughts, but honestly, on a $50 million job, there's probably about 50% of the management involved in that project that's unnecessary, really, when it comes down to it. And it's just there to CYA, cover everyone's ass. And it's sad because, everyone's following up with these emails, that email, threatening via email instead of picking up the phone or, getting on a conference line. And it's so wasteful. And these upper level managers they're not cheap. I mean, there's so much waste, and, that of course relates to time as well. I mean, all that wasted effort and manpower, relates to additional cost and additional time. So I don't know if there's a way, but if you can because let me kind of back up here. I always think that the best, and one of my mentors who was awesome, an amazing project manager, taught me this. And it's that the formula for a successful project is a good plan plus a competent team, and both of that's multiplied by desire. And if you have that equation in any type of project, it's going to be successful. Now, a good plan, you can hire a good, superintendent or come up with a great plan. A competent team, you can also pay for and hire a great team. But it's the desire aspect that I think is the most elusive and challenging to nail down. So I was thinking so how do you create or get max effort from all players or companies that are involved in a project. And most people, get motivated by, financial, motivation. So if there's a way to tie the biggest contractors that are involved in a project or have the most scope to the equity of a project and get them in on both the additional expenses or the profit, on completing sooner or finishing the project on time, under budget, then that seems to me like it would lean things up. And your framer or your electrician and your MEP trades, they're going to care if the guys aren't coordinating down there on the lower level, because at the end of the day, their ownership has an equity stake in the deal. And so now it's probably very complicated on how that would be structured. But I think that that's something that eventually here I want to try out, and it would be good to try it out, maybe on a smaller build or, hotel, maybe $5 million project or something. But I think it would work.
I love the idea, and candidly, we do a lot with shared savings clauses between us and the ownership group, right? And it's the same idea. If we finish ahead of schedule or under budget, we take some of that savings and pass it on back to the owner, or sometimes all of it. But I've never really considered the idea of going their direction. And I feel that not considering that is pretty short-sighted of me. I don't know how it looks contractually. I think you're right. It gets probably a lot of paperwork involved, but once you figure out that calculation, that recipe for the cake, that could be really, really powerful.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't see how it wouldn't work if you could figure. You'd have to get maybe a subcontractor who's younger, kind of up and coming up. Maybe, I don't know. And just build that team and get a hold of the owners of those companies and say, hey guys, this is the deal. This is how much equity we need, to make the deal happen. Are you guys in? And I mean, there's ownership right there, because nobody else, and I've seen it, they don't care about the product or the project like you do. And I don't want to say everybody, but most people who are out there, they're out there just to, get their time in and, do their work and go home. But at the end of the day, if the opening slips a month or two, I mean, they're still getting paid what they went out to get paid for.
Right. You could
and the consultants get them in on it, and again, I don't know what percentage is, or I don't know how, but get the architect and the engineers and everybody to buy in on that, so that they're pushing and answering RFIs and, hey, this is going to delay us, guys. Everyone's going to jump on it, as opposed to, well, I'll get to, in my list of other delays or other projects. I don't know. It sounds, again, it'd be very complicated on the contractual side and how to structure it. But it'd be an interesting test, and I think it would work.
Well, I think we've seen it work in the past in some of the really big ass construction and development firms, where they have all of that. They have the architecture and engineering. They have all the self-performed trades and management all under one roof. But what you just cracked the code to, I think, was taking that giant monster and figuring out a way to shrink it down to a scalable or a descalable size, so it works for what are normal projects to guys like me and Dillon and yourself. That's a wonderful idea. And if there's attorneys listening who have ideas on how to structure this thing, put it in the comments, because I think David just stumbled upon something great.
Yep. And it'll work. I really believe that it will work. And to the point where you have subcontractors waiting in line to get on your next project.
Yeah, the only thing that I can think of too is, if you do it at the ownership level, that's one piece, and they can push the teams to make everything go. But what I have seen, at least from the design side, is it doesn't matter like how good or bad we do on this project. None of it's coming to the design team anyway. It might go to ownership, but then it doesn't trickle down. So in that, you've got to align with companies that have the culture of profit sharing and like all that other stuff, so that performing better on a project does go through everybody. And the same with subs and everybody else. That like, yeah, I can bust my ass, but am I going to see a slice of this, all the way down the chain? I think that's you've got to partner with and do those deals with companies that share that same culture. Because while the ownership group might get it, it's is the ownership group treating everybody down the rest of the team in a way that like the team wants to bust their ass, the team wants to do a good job because they know that they're going to get something on the other side of it, and the culture is fun and enjoying and like a great place to be, not just beating everybody on move faster, do better type of work.
No, you're absolutely right, Dylan. And I actually ran into a similar instance on a project I did where, we were incentivizing the general contractor. If they complete, the project a month early or whatever, they're going to get 50 grand of bonus. And we had to make sure that bonus went to the project team. And if they weren't willing to guarantee that, then we said they don't get the bonus. We really did it. And it worked because, the people on the team, one guy was young, he was going to get married. This other guy had his second child. Like, they were motivated to get that bonus. And that's who you need motivated. Like, you're exactly right. You can't, that executive who, checks in on the project once in a while and gets the $50,000 bonus. And these guys see maybe, if anything, 5 grand, or if they have a company policy where they don't give bonuses, you have to make sure that's a great point. You have to make sure that it's the actual team who's on that project that sees, the bonus and the profit.
So how'd you go about that in that example you just said? Was it a contractual thing, or was it just a handshake and we're going to hold you to the fire if you don't?
No, we got it in writing.
Okay.
We did almost like a letter of intent, or an agreement. And they did it. And they were like, "Oh, this isn't company policy." Other guys on other projects, it's like, well, then nobody gets a bonus. Like, it's our money. Like, what do you, so they went with it and it worked. They finished early.
I love it.
Where do you see the industry heading? What do you see next for construction? This obviously is a big deal, but
this would change a lot of things. I think as far as the culture aspect of things, or getting the desire ramped up on projects. But I'm very interested in, and I need to spend some more time learning more and more about it. But 3D printed homes. To me, there's like zero waste. I don't know about zero, but a lot less waste. Really environmentally friendly. Time is ridiculously saved. Of course, it's going to have its new challenges, and a lot of municipalities and jurisdictions are going to take forever to actually adapt it or adopt it, just because they're very antiquated, and the way that they do their codes and review it takes forever. But there are some progressive, cities out there, municipalities, or, maybe if you go far out in the desert, they'd allow it if it's on a, unincorporated area of land. But I think there's a lot of upside on that. So that's very interesting to me. And I know they're doing some projects out in the high desert, out here in California, where they're doing 3D printed modular homes. They haven't got to the on-site stuff yet that I've seen out here. I know they're doing kind of some hybrid projects, some stuff in New York. I saw some stuff in Tennessee, where they're doing like the superstructure of 3D printed materials, and then they do stick frame above. But yeah, I like that. I think it's cool.
Yeah, from a structural standpoint, it's like you can't get a whole lot better than things that are glued together and done at a fairly molecular level. Like, it's pretty pretty amazing what 3D printed stuff can do. Where I see the biggest problem or challenge to overcome in there is with the trades. How do you get HVAC or electrical in the walls? How do you do some of those pieces? I think is the biggest thing to overcome, and it's probably just in the setup of it, right? To slip conduit down a wall, and now you're punching out concrete for back boxes and things like that. I think is some of the bigger challenges, but from a structural standpoint, even insulation, I think it can get there with concrete, and then it's just, is that the material that you want that's never going to go away, survive a nuclear blast type of structure in the middle of the desert that's impenetrable to fire and everything else. But now to demolish it, you think of a full life cycle. What's the other side of that look like? And that I have no idea.
That's why we got to keep just building to last, and not to make it easy to tear down someday, right?
David, where can they reach you?
Anybody could reach me on Instagram, mostly. David M. Carbajal is my username. Pretty simple. And anybody has questions or wants to connect, always happy to. I love conversations like this. I'm not kidding, guys. Matt, Dillon, and I have to force myself to hang up the phone to get back to work, because there's a lot. We all have passion behind what we're doing, and it's fun. It's fun that way, and you have to have that passion in our industry, because it's very stressful. And if you let every hurdle or hiccup or anything kind of weigh you down and mess up your day, you're not going to go very far. Unfortunately, you gotta go with it and deal with it. And so, you guys can reach me there.
Awesome. David, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you coming on and having the chat with us, and it's fun as usual.
Yep. Likewise, guys.
All right, guys, we covered a lot of ground today. David, thank you for coming on, for giving the insight from the owner's perspective. I think you're the first owner that we have had on the show. So it's always great getting another perspective, another way to cut things up. And guys, if you implement this shared savings profit split and it works, we'd love to see those contracts. If you've been a long time listener, I harp on contracts pretty much continuously, because I think it is one thing that holds a lot of us back in what's in our contracts, or not knowing what's in our contracts, or even just how they're structured. It's a big thing within the industry, and what David brought up today is a huge deal, big thing for the industry. And then just know there's a lot of tech moving forward, right? Whether it's 3D printing, BIM, some of the things that we've talked about in other episodes about just embedded devices and all this management stuff that we can use moving forward. So again, construction's a big, broad industry. There's a lot of room for everybody. From residential and building houses to hotels to, big $50 and $100 million developments. So again, David, thank you so much for coming on. And guys, that is this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. Till next time.